Well, good morning, everybody. On behalf of my Deputy Convener, Councillor Kelly, myself, other members and officers, may I extend a warm welcome to you all to this Planning Committee held today within Grangemouth Community Education Centre, Abbots Road, Grangemouth. In accordance with Section 43 of the Local Government in Scotland Act 2003, it has been directed that this meeting will be conducted in such a manner as to allow remote attendance by elected members. The meeting will also be live streamed. So first of all, the business of today, apologies. Any apologies?
Thank you, Convener. Yes, we have apologies submitted by Provost Bissett, Councillor Colley and Councillor Murtagh. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you. That takes us to item 2 on your agenda, which is declaration of interest. And just for clarity, I will read this out. Members should declare any financial and non-financial interest they have in any item of business at the meeting, identifying the relevant agenda item and the nature of the interest. Have we any declarations of interest at this time? That's fine, thank you. That takes us to item 3, which is the minute of the meeting of the Planning Committee held on the 15th of February 2023. It's pages 2 to 4 on your agenda. Any questions arising from the minute, or can we agree the minute? Okay, thank you. Now, before we go into item 4, just to say that we have an application for a deputation. The deputation would be Local Councillor Brian Deacon, who is requested to speak in respect to this item of business. In accordance with Standing Order 33.5, the committee shall decide whether to hear the deputation. I'm happy to let Mr. Deacon, Councillor Deacon, come in. Everybody agreed to that?
Agreed.
Okay, fine. Thank you very much. That takes us to the item, which is item 4, construction of 6 flatted dwellings and associated car parking at land to the south of 1 to 9 Bridge Street, Bonnybridge, for Mr. Robert Arbuckle. It's pages 5 to 30 in the agenda papers, and the report will be given by our officer, Mr. Brent Vivian. Thank you, Brent.
Thank you, Convener. This application is for the construction of a 2-storey building containing 6 2-bedroom flatted dwellings. Significant cut is proposed over the first 2/3 of the site to lower the site levels, to allow for vehicular access to the site and form a car park, new building platform and usable garden space to the rear. The timber crib wall is proposed to the rear of the garden space to retain the existing slope over the rest of the site. The site lies in Bridge Street within Bonnybridge Town Centre and is the former Bonnybridge Library site. It lies within a mixed-use area. There is a commercial garage adjoining the site to the south, retail uses to the west, and commercial and residential uses to the north. The library building has long since been demolished and the site is now in an overgrown and unmaintained condition. There is a stone retaining wall along the site frontage. The platform of the former building is above street level. The ground behind this platformed area rises to the rear of the site to the rear boundary. Beyond this, the land continues to rise as a wooded embankment to the level of the Forth and Clyde Canal. The application has been called in by Councillor Deacon to allow the Planning Committee to consider concerns regarding the site access, road safety and flood risk impacts. With regard to the site history, planning permission was granted in December 2006 for the erection of 6 flatted dwellings with associated car parking, access and landscaping. A more recent application for the erection of 9 flatted dwellings was withdrawn in September 2021. Turning to the consultations, the Council's Roads Development Unit have advised that the visibility displays meet the required standard but rely on third-party land to the north. They are concerned that the proposal involves the formation of an additional access at a location with several nearby and in close proximity to a bus lay-by, potentially increasing the risk of conflicting vehicle movements, leading to an increased risk of an accident occurring. However, they note the submitted transport information document, which states that the arrangement is typical of the surrounding urban area, and they agree with this. They are also aware of advice contained in Manual for Streets 2 stating that direct frontage access is common in all urban areas without evidence to suggest that this practice is unsafe. Nevertheless, they retain road safety concerns. Turning to the visibility splay issue in more detail. The visibility splay to the north relies on a small slither of third-party land. This land is the entrance to a driveway parking area. The applicant has advised that he has a verbal agreement with the neighbour to ensure that the small area within the splay is kept free of obstruction, and the intention is to add this to the title following any grant of planning permission. The securing of a permanent and binding agreement may serve to give the applicant control to allow the whole visibility splay to be provided. This would be a private matter and not one that the council would have the means to enforce. However, the acceptability of the proposed development is not considered to turn on this one point. The slight encroachment of the splay onto third-party land is considered on balance to be acceptable, taking into account the site context within a town centre, where constraints to visibility are commonplace and something that drivers can be expected to be aware of. In terms of the other consultation responses, I'd highlight that the Council's Environmental Protection Unit are satisfied with the noise impact assessment, subject to implementation of the mitigation measures outlined in the assessment. I would also highlight that Historic Environment Scotland have recommended that the boundaries of the development site adjoining the Forth and Clyde Canal Scheduled Monument be clearly marked out and care taken not to disturb or undermine any element of the canal embankment. Jack, I think it'd be useful at this stage if you could pull up some of the drawings and photos to illustrate some of the points I've discussed. If you could turn firstly to the landscape plan, if you're able to bring that up. Thank you. This plan shows the building footprint, the car park to the front of the building with a new access point onto Bridge Street. It also shows the visibility splay requirement along the side frontage. It's a dotted line. The existing stone wall along the side frontage is to be reduced in height to 600 millimetres to achieve the visibility requirement within the site itself. The plan also shows the garden ground and associated landscape elements. If you could bring up the composite plan, please, Jack. This plan shows the building elevations, a two-storey block of 6 two-bedroom flats. And if you scroll down, there's some images of what the building would potentially look like within the context from various viewpoints. Thank you. If you could turn to the photo entitled Site Frontage 1. Okay, this photo shows part of the site frontage with the existing stone boundary wall. Beyond the wall, you can see the site is in scrub and extends in height to the wooded embankment to the rear, which takes you up onto the level of the Forth and Clyde Canal. The next photo, Jack, is called Visibility to the North. Okay, this photo shows you the visibility looking north along the site frontage. Next one, visibility to the south, please, Jack. Yeah, same again, except the visibility shown this time to the south, and you can also see the location of the bus lay-by. The new access into the site would be just to the forefront of the bus stop location. Next photo, the northwest corner. This photo shows the site frontage extending to the adjoining property to the north. The driveway parking area that you can see. This is where there's a small slither of land within the visibility splay, which extends along the frontage of that parking area. The building itself is out with the display requirement. And the last one is called outward view. Thank you, Jack. Yeah, this is taken from higher into the site and is looking west towards the retail shops on the opposite side of Bridge Street. Thank you. Turning back to the report, there's been no public representations received in consideration of this application. Turning to the development plan, the site lies within the urban limits and within Bronnybridge Town Centre as defined in the local development plan. The site also forms part of mixed use allocation MU05, Bronnybridge Town Centre. The proposed uses for MU05 are retail, business, community, leisure and housing. The rest of the report essentially sets out the relevant policies of the local development plan and National Planning Framework 4 and concludes that the application accords with the development plan. As members are aware, National Planning Framework 4 was adopted on the 13th of February 2023, at which point it became part of the development plan. No issues of incompatibility of NPF 4 policies with the local development plan policies have been identified in the assessment of this application. In conclusion, the application is recommended for approval, subject to the conditions set out in section 9 of the report, and there are not considered to be any material planning considerations of such weight to otherwise justify refusal of the application. Thank you, Convener.
No, thank you, Mr. Rivian. There's now an opportunity now for Councillor Brian Deacon, local member, to be received as a deputation in respect to this item of business. You have 10 minutes, Councillor, and you can carry on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Convener, and thank you very much for listening and hearing me, everybody. As Mr. Vivian has already stated, my main concerns, and from the concerns from the people I've spoken to, is regards mostly towards the access. For those that do not know, and the pictures don't really show it well, the road is extremely busy. In the last 15 minutes, I've manually counted about 50 cars go past on the road. And speaking to local people in the area, they weren't really made aware that this planning permission was going to be going ahead. Local businesses I've spoken to are also against this just due to the amount of traffic on the road. And with the boating season where the canal is going to be coming into effect and the bridge is going to be going up, that road will become more and more dangerous as traffic park up on the road. Even now, out with the canal season, the road itself is dangerous from getting out of Tesco's, getting out of the community centre, or just travelling along due to the amount of traffic on it. The concerns also raised to myself come with residents, who when they're travelling down from High Bonnybridge or Greenhill will not be able to cross the road as easily, especially if there is more traffic or the traffic is stopped. The nearest island for safe crossing is further along next to the roundabout. This has not been, looks like it's not been considered. And finally, the part regarding the flood report states that there would be a change in usage from the land to a high critical usage from SEPA, but the flood estate and the flood table won't be changed. Anytime any digging is done, the flood table will be affected, and more housing is going to affect flood table in any part. That's all I've really got to say in this situation. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Councillor. I'll go round the table here. Is there any member got any questions to Mr. Deacon? Councillor Deacon? Any questions? And you then you can't, that is aye. That's an opportunity just now to ask questions, deputations. Okay, no questions then to the deputation, which is Councillor Deacon. Okay then. Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Deacon, for your input. Okay then, we're now going to open it up to members. Councillor Kelly, did you want to come in at that stage? Did you have something to say there?
Not really.
No, nothing to
Not
say?
really at the present.
Okay.
If we like, go around the table first.
Fine then. Okay, I'll go to Councillor Sinclair. Anything, any input?
Were you able to ask questions of officers at this point?
Yes, indeed, yep.
Just from, we heard about the potential danger on the road in this position. Do we have any accident data or any other kind of data that would suggest that that's the case?
Maybe we'll get Craig Russell on. Craig, are you aware of any statistics in relation to the question posed by Councillor Sinclair in terms of accident reports?
Morning, thanks convener. No, I'm not aware. I've got access to accident statistics just now, and I can tell that there was one further west towards the new library. I don't have data on that, but certainly the indication that I have at the moment is that there aren't a lot of accidents in that area, convener.
Thank you very much. Any other questions coming? Councillor Steenbank.
Thank you, convener. I have a few questions for officers, probably the roads team. Obviously, the consultation with roads development factored in heavily the bus lay-by. Have we assessed the risks of other current sites to the bus lay-by, or does this development constitute a unique risk to the bus lay-by? Thank you.
Thanks, convener. No, we haven't assessed the risks to other accesses. When we review planning applications, we review the application in front of us, as you might be aware. So our focus has been to consider this application and any potential risks that might bring to the road network.
Thank you. I think perhaps to get a better idea for members, what would you consider additional hazard perception that's going to have to occur by road users, as well as, I imagine, bus drivers coming out of the bus lay-by if this development goes ahead, just within the context of the area? I was just looking at the drawings and I'm struggling to see what additional risk would really be factored in by potentially 6 vehicles coming out of this site.
I'll answer that as best I can, convener. Our concerns here are sort of general. As Councillor Deacon mentioned, this is a relatively busy section of the network. We've got the mini roundabout just north of the application site. We've got a Tesco opposite the site. We've got a garage south of the site. We've got the library across the road. There's quite a lot going on in quite a short space of road. The bus lay-by, if there's a bus parked in that lay-by, first of all, a bus can't park in that lay-by. It's not large enough for a normal sized bus. If a vehicle is trying to emerge from the application site, it can't see up the hill, it can't see south beyond the bus. So that's our principal concern in relation to the bus lay-by. But as I said, in more general terms, we're concerned about introducing another access, introducing more vehicle movement, slowing down turning in an area that already has quite a lot of that going on.
Right, thank you very much. No further questions, convener.
Okay, thank you. Going down the table here, Councillor, I think Councillor Flynn had his hand up.
Yes, thank you, convener. The first thing I wanted to ask, my memory is not that good, but when it was the old Bonnybridge Library, did it have a car park with it, you know, in front of the library or beside it?
No, no, it didn't have a car park.
No, it didn't. No. Okay, that's fine. My only other point I was going to make was that as there are 6 dwellings, and even assume that each dwelling had a maximum of 2 cars, you know, it would only really be 12 cars in a day and people would go to work. I don't personally see a huge volume of traffic necessarily going to and from the flats, although it's an unknown quantity. I would imagine it'd be relatively low. So that was all my point. Thank you very much, convener.
Okay, thank you for your input, Councillor Flynn. Any questions for Councillor Bowes, Councillor Kerr?
I should go Councillor Kerr first, and I'll both been trying to come in.
Thanks, convener. Probably for Mr Vivian, with regards to some of the points that Councillor Deacon mentioned, will he address the questions that was asked, convener, or will I need to ask the same questions of it?
Well, I think you'd be better asking your own
Right,
questions.
okay,
Yeah.
okay. Right, regarding SEPA, SEPA was mentioned, and we've got in the report that SEPA hasn't got any objections. Is there anything you can add to that, Brent?
Because of the relatively minor scale of the application, SEPA, when consulted, they would only refer us to standing advice for a local development. We only generally consult with them in relation to more major applications, so SEPA have not been involved in this this process.
Okay.
Having said that, there was a flood risk assessment and a drainage impact assessment which came in with the application, which were assessed by our flooding team.
Right, thanks. I find it concerning that we've got a bus stop that a bus can't fit into, as in the roads network. I don't think that is good for the area. I understand, and I know the area very well. It is a busy road, but probably like Councillor Flynn, I didn't see a major doubt with this, convener. I'm quite happy to go with propose that we accept the officer's recommendations.
Okay, prepared from Councillor Kerr. So you're formally moving the recommendations contained within the report. I'll second you on that, but I'll reserve the right to come back in and say a bit about it. But Councillor Bowes.
Thank you, convener. I'm taking us back to the roads side. Hopefully this will make my mind up with things. And 4.1, although there is notes of concerns, there is certain points which is the transport information document, and it was typical of the surrounding urban area. Then you've got the manual for streets 2, direct frontage, which again has got the words common in urban areas. Can you maybe explain that a little bit more? I mean, I know the area reasonably well, but that's obviously, I know you retain safety road concerns, but that's obviously that has an effect on the concerns on the road. Can that just be expanded on, please?
I'll do my best on that. Sorry, Brent, would you like me to take that one? That was in relation to our consultation response.
Yeah, that's fine. Thanks, Craig.
So sorry about that, convener. In response to Councillor Bowes' queries, yes, I mean overall we retain concerns. As I mentioned earlier, there's a lot going on in that part of the road network. This is introducing a new access with the new slowing, turning, emerging vehicles, etc., etc. On the flip side of that, we have advised planning in relation to those two documents that the advice in those documents is that the arrangement is typical of the surrounding urban area. We agree with that. That's a sort of statement of fact. There's a document called Manual for Streets 2, which is largely an English-based document, which states that direct frontage access is common in all urban areas. And by that statement, what they mean is there's a lot of driveways and a lot of accesses in urban areas, as everyone can probably imagine. So we're simply making the point that yes, we have concerns. However, there are documents out there that say that this arrangement is common.
Okay, thank you. Just to clarify where we are, we've had a motion moved and seconded. I'd just like to come in and say a few words in relation to the fact that I fully support this. This application is in, but there was a former application that came in, I think it was 17 years ago. That's how long that this site has lain derelict. I can understand some of the things that are coming forward in terms of how busy the road is. But the fact is, we had the same situation when we opened Tesco there and the other shops in that area. And what to me is, having lived in the area for so many years, that it's actually been beneficial in terms of slowing the traffic down, coming down from Greenhill and High Bonnybridge and coming forward from the Camlin area. And I believe that this will fit in very well. I think it's important to realise that this area has been lying derelict for so long. And the reason that it was moved from the library in the first instance was because the changes in the legislation in terms of the access for disabled, and there wasn't a disabled access at that time from Bonnybridge Library, and they had to move. There was a company from Kilsyth, Bennett Kilsyth had bought it. They'd put an application in, and we've been waiting on something happening since then. We now have an application in. And obviously, it's been well looked at by our officers. Obviously, there is certain concerns in relation to where it is. But to me, I think it will fit in very well in that area, and I'm quite happy to support. And I've already seconded the motion by Councillor Kerr to go with the officer's recommendation. So I'm going to come back. We've got a motion moved and seconded. Is there anybody otherwise minded at this stage? Councillor Redmond, yes, sir.
I had a few questions to ask, but I'll just leave them. I think like you're saying, Tesco's and that's is there, and then we're saying it's sort of, yes, a front opening is typical for areas, but we've got Tesco's, which is probably the busiest car park in Bonnybridge. We've got the bridge that goes over the canal, lifts up and down. The traffic there can be, sometimes you're in Tesco's and you can't get out. It can be like 5-10 minutes before you're getting out. I had a question on, it looks from the drawings as if the front retaining wall is going to be removed, and I think I'd say that's about 2 metres high, maybe a wee bit under. But if that's removed and then a lot of the site's taken down to the current road level, that must be hundreds and hundreds of tons of soil that's going to come out there. So I was just wondering, I was trying to make it out off the drawing, but I couldn't see. But I was wondering if Mr. Vivian could tell us what the estimated soil removal would be for that site, or if we would like to talk about that in any more detail.
Brent?
The retaining wall would be reduced to 600 millimetres in height along the frontage, and you're quite correct. To form the car park and the platform for the building, site levels will reduce over the first at least half of the site. I don't have an estimation of the amount of material that would need to be moved off site, but it is noted in section 7A13 of the report that obviously that process would have to be carefully managed. There's a recommended condition for a construction environmental management plan, which would need to consider all construction-related impacts and mitigation measures agreed with ourselves if the application was approved.
Right. That's interesting. And then they were talking about up at the back of the site, there's going to be a timber crib wall. Is that a retaining wall?
Yeah, that would retain the rest of the slope extending to the rear boundary. And beyond that, the slope continues to the Forth and Clyde Canal. So yes, that would be a retaining structure.
Right, perfect. And then just my kind of last kind of question, I was thinking, when you're in Tesco's, sometimes you're in Tesco's and Greggs, and as I say, it is busy. It can be hard to get out. The traffic queues back from the existing roundabout. Would there be any scope of putting a sort of mini roundabout in? Obviously, you're going to have four entrance points to it now. But if you've got a road, an entrance point there, an entrance point there, would a mini roundabout not have the traffic flowing a bit more freely rather than people waiting for ages? Is that something that could be done, or is that, would that be for the council to do?
Maybe bring Craig Russell in on this. Craig, you've heard what the councillor has said.
Yeah, thanks, convener. And first thing to say is that it's not something that was proposed as a result of the application. So what I'm about to say is without drawings, without any sort of technical information on this, but many roundabouts are generally introduced to improve existing junctions. They're not really recommended to form sort of new junctions or to serve new developments such as this. There's also supposed to be relatively balanced flow on each arm for a mini roundabout, and I suspect we wouldn't have that here. We've got, you know, the priority, or most of the traffic would be on Bridge Street itself, with relatively few movements coming from Tesco and far fewer coming from this development in relation to the amount of traffic on Main Street, Bridge Street, sorry. So my first sort of, my gut feel is that wouldn't be appropriate. That's before we start to think about the land take that would be required either on Tesco's side or the application side. You know, my gut says there probably isn't room to do that, let alone the technical reasons that I've outlined previously, Convener.
Thank you, Craig.
Well, if that's the case, I was maybe going to propose a sort of motion here. I think it'd be good, obviously, to have the flats here. It would be a nice development in Bonnybridge, but I'm worried about the traffic and the amount of land you're taking, earth you're taking away. You're taking away a retaining wall. It's very close to a canal. If you're taking a lot of soil and a retaining wall away from a canal banking, I know it says in the flood risk assessment that there's nothing to worry about the canal's line, but that does seem a bit of a concern to me, taking so much soil away from a canal bank. The traffic as well. So I was going to move that we go to a site visit in this, and I don't know if I've got a seconder or anything, but just to observe the traffic. I want to see where the opening is exactly going to be. Is it going to be in line with the Tesco's opening? I think a site visit would be beneficial for that.
Councillor Kelly.
I'll second that motion.
Cheers.
Site visit.
Okay, just to clarify where we are, we've got a motion moved and seconded to agree the recommendations contained within the report. We've now got an amendment moved by Councillor Redmond, seconded by Councillor Kelly, that we go on a site visit. Anybody else like to come into debate at this stage? Mr Henderson will explain the situation as it stands. Thank you.
Thank you, Convener. In this case, we have a substantive motion, which has been made by Councillor Kerr, seconded by Councillor Buchanan, and an amendment for a site visit moved by Councillor Redmond and seconded by Councillor Kelly. Now, we do have provision in standing orders, which were introduced just over a year ago, to try to avoid a situation where you would have a vote on a substantial motion as against a procedural amendment or vice versa. So the procedure is that there would be a vote for or against the procedural matter. So it would be a vote for a site visit or against a site visit. If the vote was for a site visit, the site visit would be agreed. If it was against the site visit, then you would revert to the original motion by Councillor Kerr and seconded by Councillor Buchanan, upon which any further amendment could be made. So on that basis, we would have a vote, as I've said, for and against having a site visit. And just to clarify, I'm presuming the site visit would be intended purely to be an opportunity for the committee to view the physical characteristics and the surrounding of the development site?
Yeah, I think so. See how close it is to the canal, observe the traffic, and I think it would be good if maybe the applicant could mark out where the opening would be, the new road access.
Thank you, Councillor Redmond, and that's perhaps something that our planning colleagues could point to during the course of a site visit. So on that basis, and can I also just check, I think Councillor Murtagh is not present in the meeting at the moment. Can I just confirm that with the clerk?
That's correct.
Thank you. Thank you. So running through members present on a roll call, and just to clarify, for a site visit or against a site visit. So if you would say for, against. Provost Bissett is absent. Councillor Bowes.
Against.
Councillor Buchanan.
Against.
And Councillor Colley is absent. Councillor Flynn.
Against.
Councillor Forrest.
Against.
Councillor Kelly.
For.
Councillor Kerr. Councillor Murtagh is not present. Councillor Redmond.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Sinclair.
Against.
And Councillor Steenbank.
For.
And we have 3 for a site visit and 6 against a site visit, which takes us back to the position that there is a motion by Councillor Kerr, seconded by Councillor Buchanan, to grant planning permission in accordance with the officer recommendations. Thank you, convener.
Okay. So we'll take that. No other amendments? Okay, agreed. Thank you very much for that one. That's now to item 5, which is a planning review committee procedure MPF4. It's pages 31 to 34, and I believe that Mr. Shaw is going to be presenting the report.
It's me, in fact.
Is it yourself, Ian? Fine, thank you, sir.
Thank you, convener. It is indeed me presenting the report on this matter, and it's primarily a procedural report, and by way of background, it relates to the Planning Review Committee. And as members will be aware, the Planning Review Committee is the committee of the Council that deals with requests for review made by applicants for decisions taken by officers under delegated powers on local applications. There are lots of parts involved in that, but just to clarify that, other decisions taken by the Council, for instance by officers on major applications under delegated powers or by the Planning Committee, would otherwise be subject to appeal to the Scottish Ministers. So we're only dealing in this report with reviews that are sought to decisions taken by officers under delegated powers on local matters. So on that basis, and I think it's probably also worth just pointing out, because this will be useful as I go through the report, that applicants who may wish to seek a review on a decision on their application have 3 months to do so, post the date on which they receive the decision notice that's been issued on the application. So at the moment, we have a number of applications where review has been sought by an applicant, and the officer decision has not taken account of MPF4, which now forms part of the statutory development plan as from the 13th of February. So decisions have been taken under delegated powers, and a decision notice issued that didn't take account of NPF4, but subject to review, these matters are now being referred back to the Planning Review Committee for essentially an appeal to be carried out on that original decision. And that, as you may know from attending these committees, is a consideration that's taken on what's referred to as a de novo basis. So it's a fresh decision that's taken on the matter. So in this case, it is important that when the fresh decision is being taken, it's taken in the context of the development plan as it now is, and that includes for NPF4. So I think members will also be aware that at a recent meeting of the Planning Review Committee, which dealt with 3 applications, there was almost an immediate referral for written submissions to be submitted by the applicant and the Planning Authority on NPF4 and the implications of NPF4 in relation to these applications. So what happened is members appeared at the committee and were almost immediately recommended by officers to continue the matter for these written submissions to be provided. So what this report does is it utilises a provision in standing orders that allows planning committee to set certain procedures that can be followed by a planning review committee. And what we're doing is saying, can we as officers go off with any outstanding applications or any that may still be to be received that didn't consider NPF4? Can we go off and get written submissions from the applicant and the planning authority in advance of the matter coming back to the planning review committee? So what it would mean is if we can collate these comments, these will be put before the planning review committee at its initial meeting on the matter, and will then save the planning review committee having to take that decision at the next meeting, and essentially it speeds up the process and allows the committee to have full information that could potentially allow it to take a decision at the first meeting without the requirement, certainly from NPF4, for further information. So that's a summary of the position. I realise it's procedural and perhaps to some degree relatively complex, but the recommendation purely is, can the committee, the planning committee, agree that officers do the written submission process with the applicants and the planning committee in advance of the first meeting of the planning review committee on any of the outstanding applications that are either with us still to go to planning review committee or which may still be due to be received by the council during the appeal or review period. And thank you, convener. With that said, I'm happy to answer any questions that members may have on the matter.
Thank you, Mr. Henderson. Obviously, this is a new frontier for us all on planning. One of the areas, obviously, mentioned that discussing the procedural aspects of it, but one of the areas that I would like to see is there any documentation coming forward that actually explains and simplifies what the new NPF4 policy is, so that we can relate then to any applications coming in? Because the fact is that at this particular time, although you've explained the situation in terms of the procedural matter, members still haven't got anything in front of them that shows clearly what the changes are with an NPF4 policy in relation to any application that's in, if you can understand that.
Thank you, convener, and I think it's an excellent point that's been made. The reports that have come forward so far, so for instance, the report before you today that we've just taken a decision on made reference to NPF4 and commented, I think in that case, that it didn't have an impact on the current development plan considerations. When I say current development plan, that now includes NPF4, but there wasn't an adverse impact of NPF4 in the decision making. And all reports coming forward will be drafted on the basis that they include information on the full development plan, including NPF4. I would also add that following this meeting, we have Mr. Shaw with us today, and he will be running members through a presentation on NPF4 so that there's a greater, and I think as we go forward in time, an emerging and growing understanding of NPF4. I think the report before you today comments that indeed the Scottish Government recognised, this is paragraph 3.2 of the report, the Scottish Government recognised that it may take some time for planning authorities and stakeholders, as we've said in nice language, to get to grips with NPF4 policies, but officers will ensure that members are as up to speed as they can be and as informed as they can be on NPF4 at all points. Thank you, convener.
Just touching on, sorry, I'll bring Councillor Bowes in a minute. Just touching on that issue again. When the LRBs and that were first brought in, there was quite a bit of correspondence that came for the Scottish Government in relation to how it would affect, etc. But the fact is, what I'm seeing at the moment is that although we've heard quite a bit about this NPF4, and what's happened is it's already came into force. But the fact is that we couldn't finalise these three ones that had already came forward. But are we going to get something? I know that Mr. Shaw's here, and hopefully maybe he can fill some of the points in. But are we going to get anything from any documentation that we can sit down at night and we can have a look at it ourselves to say, right, okay, so a better understanding than getting an agenda with items on it that's got changes in relation to MPF4 when we haven't really still haven't got a clear understanding and awareness. Sorry to be.
No, thank you, convener. I think it's excellent points that are being made, and I think today's presentation will be a starting point, and is maybe a point where I could perhaps hand over to Mr. Dryden and Mr. Shaw, who may be able to comment on any future works around that.
Fine, we'll bring in Councillor Rouse first, though. I think he's got an initial question.
No, that's fine. One, I welcome Mr. Shaw being here after discussions last week with the two Ians, the last meeting, sorry, with two Ians about getting us a bit more information. I would hope there would be details, what the convener's looking for, some sort of paperwork, so that I can stay up to 2 o'clock in the morning reading it. Coming back to this report, can I say, and then we'll keep it nice and short, it makes common sense. There's no sense in stuff coming to a meeting, you're then having to continue it so that we can then delay on things. I will move the recommendations in this report because it's quite simply to make common sense, as we would expect from Mr. Henderson.
Quite happy to second that. Any other questions on that issue at the moment before we go in? Councillor Kerr.
Thanks, convener. I fully support the proposal of the recommendations. My concern was at the last local review body. Unfortunately, it was continued. This is just a personal thing. I took a day off my work for that. So I thought it could have been done before that. We had a meeting the week before where it came in the day before. I thought we could have been proactive and say, look, this is going to impact us going forward. But what we need to today, convener, is some of these local, they've got 3 months to appeal for the local review body. And whether it's officers, applicants, agents, our procedures, some of these are going a year and a half. It's too long. This is people's lives we're dealing with here. And if this helps get us to get quicker, great. But they just, I've had the experience at Baldmain House, and it took me 2.5 years to get a plan permission in Falkirk. And how stressful that is for somebody building one house is absolutely horrendous. So if it helps that procedure going forward, but we can't be a year, 2 years with an appeal. And as I say, if it helps, my concern, and I asked this at the meeting, the local review body meeting, when we ask the applicant and it comes back to the officer, because I've had 2 answers, will the officer's recommendations change, or will it still be the same recommendation?
Mr. Henderson.
Thank you. In the context of a planning review committee, there isn't actually an officer recommendation, there was an officer decision, which is then being subject to an appeal process essentially. So what you don't have is something similar to the planning committee where there is a recommendation. The planning review committee is a context where it's really for the members to look at the full information before them and come to that de novo or fresh decision on the matter.
I maybe says that wrong, Mr. Henderson. Will the decision of the officer change when he gets the information from, because if the National Planning Framework 4 and it comes back and the applicant says, well, I think our application meets that now, officers go and say, I think you're right, will that decision change?
No, it doesn't, but I understand the question. I think that's a good question. Thank you, Councillor Kerr. The decision has been taken,
Right,
the
okay.
decision notice has been issued, and we're then into the appeal process. But you would have a planning advisor on the committee that could be asked for advice and comment on the application of development plan policies around the application. That would normally be a planning officer that's independent of the original decision. In fact, it is always an officer independent of the original decision, so that they're not tainted by having been involved in a decision that's then subject to the review. So they come to you with a clear mind as an advisor to the planning review committee.
Right, okay. Now this is maybe a controversial question, but I'm sure you'll answer it, Ian. So if these applications who have been, haven't they been to the local review body and have been refused, will they get an opportunity to come back?
If there has been a refusal decision notice issued, then that's the decision that was taken by officers, and the route for an applicant in that case is to seek a review, which would then come before the planning review committee.
No, no, you're not getting what I'm saying. They've passed the time for appeal, but because of the new MPF4, will they get an opportunity? No.
No,
just
the
no.
decision has been taken.
That's fine.
But what I'm sure the planning officers will be doing at the moment is looking at all of these kind of applications and considering them in the context of NPF4. So before you would see a weekly list or before a decision notice would be issued, they will now be looking at NPF4 in relation to these applications. So we'll have a sort of transitional period for decision notices have been issued. People may raise a review, but there's then the cases where there hasn't actually been a decision notice issued as yet, but officers will be looking at the implications of NPF4 before any decision notice is issued. I don't know if Ian's got any comments on that.
No, I just want to come in and just confirm. I think as we're understanding this morning, we're in a period of transition, but I think as decisions have been taken, that decision has been taken. It'll be down to the applicant if they're still in time to consider MPF4, and they may then decide if they are in time still within that 3 months to make an appeal, and that will then be for the local review board for certain applications to decide the merits of the case. If they've gone beyond that period, then that is then for the applicant to consider whether they wish to resubmit a further planning application. They're entitled to do that. But clearly it would not be for ourselves to certainly determine any merits of that. However, obviously, if we are approached or our officers approached, we'd make obviously the applicant aware of potential courses of action as general guidance and support. So we're in that period. So really the focus today is on live applications that have not yet had a decision, including minded to grant decisions. So that's where we're starting. It's a kind of a triage. There's a lot of work involved in this. As mentioned in the report, officers are currently trying to go through all their casework, and as you'll see today, we have a case before you which you've now determined where we felt on balance there's some applications are more complex than others, so we're trying to just work our way through that, as many planning authorities are doing just now. So we are unfortunately in a period of uncertainty, and it will take time.
Okay, thank you very much. Can I just urge officers, if they haven't already, these three that came up previously, it's people's lives. Let's try and get that done as soon as possible. I've got other questions, but I'll wait for no.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kerr. I think some of the questions there were so pertinent, because when we were at the last meeting, we were only told that morning, because we've come in for some criticism that we actually didn't go ahead with the decision-making process at those meetings. But one of the areas that I found quite interesting was the fact that our officer had said at that time that MPF4 could be beneficial to some of the applications that are already in, and could be negative to others. Now, in terms of that goes with the question that Councillor Kerr asked, because if, say, for instance, an application came in and it was looked at again with the new policies, and it stated clearly that oh, the policy of NPF4 of relevance to this application are, and it goes through them, and it says, well, this application actually does meet that. So therefore, Councillor Kerr's question in relation to, well, if there's a change then with a new policy in terms of the discussion on this application, then would the officers then change their recommendation? And you said quite clearly, no.
Thank you, convener. I think the no that I expressed was in relation to where we've already issued a decision notice. There the decision has been taken, and it would be for the applicant to consider appeal or review. But where a decision notice hasn't yet been issued by the planning authority, we're required at the point of issuing a decision notice to have regard to the full scope of the development plan, which now includes NPF4. So where no decision notice has yet been issued, my planning colleagues will be scurrying around making sure that they fully take into account the implications of NPF4. So what may have been in their minds a month ago may have changed given the introduction of NPF4, but no, where a decision notice has already been issued, it's really over to the applicant to seek either appeal to the Scottish Ministers or a review to the Planning Review Committee as appropriate. Thanks, convener. No, that's how it's important that we as members who take the decision, the final decision, are made aware of all the situations in relation to the new policies. Anybody else like to ask a question, Mr. Henderson, at this stage? Okay, then. Are we going? Thank you. Okay, everybody, thank you very much for your time and consideration. That brings us to the end of this meeting today, and we'd like to thank everybody, all members and officers, for their deliberations, and thank you very much.